What we have in front of us today is the key fob for a Citroen Berlingo. Now, as far as I'm aware, the key for the Citroen Saxo, the Citroen Picasso and the Citroen Xsara are exactly the same or very similar. One of the most common problems with this key fob is that after a while there are two micro switches on here, one here and one here. So if you have a look here, this is micro switch number 1 and this is micro switch number 2. These are old style switches and they fail. It's one of the most common problems, and if it fails, what will happen is you will not be able to lock or unlock your central locking system on your Citroen. So what I'm going to show you today is how to change these switches out and fully service your key fob. If you try to order a new key fob from the dealers, as far as I'm aware, it's in the region of about £150. But what I'm going to show you today, you could do it for much less than that and save yourself a boatload of money. An important point that I want to mention is be very careful when you take this key fob apart. This PCB here fits into the back here, and there are two flaps here, one here and one here. You got to push them back with your fingers, okay, and get something in here to sort of wedge it out. Now, there's a very important point that I need to mention here. If you have a look here, there's a component inside here, and this is married to the ECU of the vehicle. So what happens is when you put your key into the ignition switch, this component here communicates with the ECU and allows the car to start. So whatever you do, don't throw this away, right? So in fact, I'll take it out in front of you here. All you need to do is you need to get a little tool and just give it a little nudge from the bottom and it pops out. So we're going to need this because this part here, we're going to put it into our new key fob. So whatever you do when you're taking this apart, make sure you don't chuck this away. Another point that I'd like to bring to your attention, this key section here, this is your original key. So what you do is you put a screw in there, you unscrew that, and this whole thing pops out, and then you can put this into your new key fob. You put it in and you screw it in from here. I need to give you a critical update here. Apparently there's a few versions of this key which look exactly the same from the outside, but the internals are slightly different. If you've got a key that looks like this, what that means is you have a fixed key, and these keys are not supposed to be removed. In the video I was showing you the type of key where you unscrew it and you just pull it out from the bottom. But this key here cannot be taken off. I was sent this by a customer who wanted the key fob restoration service, and I attempted to remove this key. I actually ground out all the plastic around the key and I took it out. But what I found was the locating hole inside this key is actually bigger than the screw-in type one. So if you took this key out and you try to put it into the screw-in type key fob, what you'd find is because the hole's too big, it will be loose and it will start wobbling and moving around, so it's not going to work. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you've got a key like this, then what you have to do is you'll have to take the key down to your local locksmiths and get them to cut a key for you onto the uncut key that comes with the key fob refurbishment set. Now this should not cost more than £10, as these keys are quite old, they're nothing modern, and there's nothing really complicated involved. So a local locksmith should be able to do that for you for about £10. So this is something that I just wanted to point out to you. Let's get back to the video. Another issue that I want to mention, or another point that I'd like to bring to your attention, is these parts here, this metal part here and this metal part here. It can all be taken out, and this will need to be taken out to be fitted into your new key fob. I'll show you that in a bit. The new key fob will come with a brand new uncut key, so if for any reason this is damaged or you can't use this for whatever reason, then what you can do is you can go down to your local key cutters and you can take the old key with you and they'll cut you a new key. This part comes with the new key fob, but it's uncut. What we're going to do now is we're going to move or remove the metal piece here. There's two metal pieces. One is for the plus, and the other one goes around the edge of the round battery, which is for the minus. So let's do that now. I'm using a pair of tweezers, and we're just going to go in from the side here. From the side here, and we're going to pop this out. There you go. So that's piece number 1. Right. This is what it looks like. I'm sure you can see that quite clearly. And now we're going to pop out piece number 2. Now you've got to be careful with this because these bits here sit under a piece of plastic, so when you're popping it off, just be careful you don't bend it too much. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to come just under here and I'm going to pop it off from here. There you go, that's quite clear. And this is what it should look like. If I can get that to focus for you. There you go, that's your piece number 2. So it's very important because you need to take these 2 pieces out, so don't forget that. You can buy a full service from me where basically you send me the key and I will change everything out for you. You send me your old key and I'll change out all the components inside and the micro switch. Now please do bear in mind, this is not a fault finding service or a diagnostic service. This is specifically just to change out all the components inside and replace your buttons, nothing else. So you'll find those links at the bottom. Please do use them if they can be of any help to you. We shall now proceed to replacing those buttons and the continuation of the service of this key fob. One of the things that I like to do with these metal components here is just freshen them up a bit so that they have a bit more bite when they're fitted back into the new housing. And the way you do that is if you have a look in here, these have sort of bent and changed their shape. So what I like to do is I like to get a flat pair of needle nose pliers and just flatten this part out a little bit. You can see that quite clearly what I'm doing there. And I just go around this way and do the same thing. You're just basically helping it get its original shape back, and when you fit it into the new housing it will give it a better bite. Okay, and we do the same thing with the piece number 2. If you have a look here, piece number 2 is not too bad actually, but I'm still going to flatten it out a little bit more here. The part here which loses its shape. There you go. There you go. You can see that should give it a bit more bite when it's fitting into the new housing. Okay, we're going to fit those pieces back into the new housing here, and we're going to go in the reverse of the way that we took them off. So the first one that we took off was this piece here, and I'm just going to use let's take this out of the picture here, just a plastic tool with a pointy end on it, just to press them in. I'm going to be very careful here that we don't break anything. So here we go. You have a look here. What I did was I push those metal pieces behind here. I'm going to hold it in with my fingernails, and then I'm going to use this to push it down from here, okay, and around here, and make it click into place. I'll show you once it's done. Okay, I believe that's good enough, and I'm quite happy with that, if you can see that over there. Alright, and we're going to put in piece number 2 now, more or less exactly the same thing. What we're going to do is we're going to sit it down into the housing, and we'll just push it into place, hold it down with our thumb, and then use the tool again, this tool here, to push around here basically, just to get it back in. There we go, and that's in, and that's perfect. So ready to take the new battery. Now do bear in mind, sometimes you may need to lift these bits here, this bit here, slightly, just to make it touch the PCB from the back, but you'll have to inspect that yourself and see how much you need to push it up. But be careful when pushing these, because you could easily break these from here. Okay, when you fit your new battery inside the key fob, make sure the side with the writing on it is facing you, and the side that looks like this is going into the fob. So we take this, and what we do is we bring it here and we just pop it into place like that. There you go. That's how your battery should look once it's been refitted. Now what we're going to do is we're going to swap over the original key from the original fob into the new fob. So this here, remember, is an uncut key. I'm going to unscrew that, take it out, unscrew that, take that, and put it in here. So I'll do that in front of you now. For this you will need a Phillips screwdriver. So let's take the old fob. Yeah, we've got the old fob here, and we're going to unscrew this. There you go. Okay, put that to a side, and this was the original fob. If you have a look here, all we're going to do is just bend this slightly, pull it slightly, and it comes out just like that. Okay, so I'll put that to a side for a second, and I'll bring the new fob here. The new fob comes with its old screw, so it doesn't matter if you don't want to use the old screw or you lose it, it's okay. What happens with this is it just unscrews and comes out. Put that to a side. This is the uncut key on the new fob. Okay, pulls out like that. Same principle. Put that to a side. We get our original key and we slide it into here. Okay, get this screw that came with it, put it in here, and just screw it in basically. That's it. That's all there is to fitting your new key. So we've changed over the battery components, we've changed over the key, and the only thing now left to do is to replace the switches. So we'll get over to doing that now. Before I start working on a board, what I do like to do is use some heat resistant tape and cover the components which I'm not going to be working on, just as a measure of extra protection. So I've already cut a piece out, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. And we just fix it from around the back. That's good enough. Just means I don't get any heat onto any of these components here. Now, when you're working with your soldering iron, be very, very careful that you don't damage any of these traces here. This trace here and this trace here. We're going to be moving over to the solder station in a minute, and there won't be any audio, so I want to explain to you what it is that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to clamp this down in a PCB holder. The PCB holder, this is what it looks like. Okay, so I'm going to clamp this down in here, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some flux on the 2 points of the 2 micro switches here and here. Flux, this is what flux looks like. It doesn't have to be this type of flux, but for working on PCBs, this type of flux I find is the best. But you could use any other flux that you've got, which is not going to be an issue. And what I'm going to do is, as I said, I'm going to place flux on the 2 points of the 2 switches, right? And then I'm going to heat up those switches with a heat gun. Okay, once I heat them off, I'll use a pair of tweezers while I'm heating them to hold them in place, and eventually they should just pop off. This one will pop off and this one will pop off. Then what I'll do is I will get some alcohol and a Q-tip, and I'll just get you a Q-tip to show you, and I will clean up the underneath of the 2 switches, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some 60-40 solder. This is 60-40 solder here, a piece of 60-40 solder, and I'm going to place some new solder onto the pads of the switches. There's one here, one here, one here, and one here. Once I've done that, I will hold the new micro switches in place over the two pads, and I'll place some more flux on there, and I'll use the heat gun to kind of just sit it in place and to make sure they're sitting in place. Once I've done that, I will then come over with my soldering iron and I will go over the connection here and the connection here, just to make sure it's all fresh, nice and fresh. And that's it. That's all basically that there is to it. So let's move over to the next section. Okay, so we've just finished our soldering job and we're back from the soldering station. We've cleaned up our PCB with alcohol and a brush, and you can see it's all nice and neat and the buttons are working perfectly. So let's give them a click, and let's give this one a click as well. Critical update number 2. There's something else that I need to make you aware of. If this is your first time soldering, I would recommend that you give it to somebody who has some experience in soldering. I would not recommend that you attempt this if this is your first time ever trying to solder. I want to give you a bit of a backstory to this picture that's on the screen at the moment. So this is a Citroen fob that was sent to me by a customer, and he tried to remove the switches himself, and what he ended up doing was, while he was taking the key off, he ripped out one of the pads. So the hook that comes over in the picture, that's a pair of tweezers, and it's pointing to a pad that has been torn out. So if you have a look on the right side, there's still some solder left there. So the solder point of the switch can be soldered to the right side, but on the left side, underneath the tweezers, you can see what it's pointing to. Where you would normally solder the left side of the switch, there is no pad. There is supposed to be a copper pad of the switch is soldered onto, but that pad has been torn out, okay, because it was somebody's first time trying to do it, and obviously they never had any experience and they made a slight mistake. So I guess what I'm trying to say is these pads are really easy to tear out unless you know what you're doing. So if it's your first time, please get somebody else to do it for you. Otherwise, what will happen is when the pad is torn out like this, it makes it a lot more complicated, and we have to repair that pad, and obviously there's an extra charge for that as well. So you want to try and do this as cheaply as as economically as possible. So I'm just giving you a heads up on that. Be careful about ripping out pads like that. To repair that torn out pad, what I had to do was manually create a new pad that the switch could be soldered onto. So what we had to do was we had to clean up that area and create a new copper pad. We had to get a piece of copper, make the shape of the pad, and we had to adhere that pad to the board by the use of solder mask, which was placed under a UV light to help it dry. Now, what we also had to do was, when we placed the switch on top of here, because that pad is not bonded in as it would be from the factory, we had to then glue the switch down onto the PCB to give it some extra strength, and then we soldered the 2 points onto the pad, and finally, to give it a bit of super strength, we also placed some solder mask around the edges of the switch to give it a bit more strength as well. It's quite interesting actually. I just thought I'd share that with you to give you some idea of some of the background work that we have to do sometimes. Okay, back to the video. Right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to grab the front of the new key fob. Okay, we're going to turn it over and we're going to grab our PCB, and it just fits in there like so. Right, so we've taken our new PCB and we've popped it into the front cover, under the flap here and under the flap here. And now all we're going to do is grab the back of the key here, okay, and fit the front cover on. Remember, these two pieces here, okay, they need to touch the two pads here, okay, so as long as it's sticking out about that much, that'll be fine. You can see that for a reference, and all you do is you take it, place it in here, okay, and there we go, it's all done. We've got our key and we've got a new key fob fully serviced. So let's just press it to make sure the buttons are working. Can you hear that? That's working fine. And then we've got another button here, and the job's done. Well, if you found this video helpful, please do like, subscribe and share it with others, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now and have a nice day.